Boys and girls, what I'd like to do is go ahead and continue reading our story, The Two Bad Ants. Today the story is written by Chris Van Allsburg, and we're talking about making predictions. The story, Bad Ants, it is a fantasy because in the story, the ants in the story are talking. And so we want to find out what happens next. So what I want you to think about at the end of when I finished the last time, the ants decided that they wanted to stay at the house. They wanted to stay. So I want you to predict, do you think they will stay? Remember, when we make predictions, we use what we know and what the author tells us in the pictures and the words to help us make a smart guess about what we think is going to happen next. Okay, so we want to decide, do you think that they're going to stay or not? All right, so daylight came and the sleeping ants were unaware of the changes taking place in their newfound home. A giant silver scoop hovered above them, then plunged deep into the crystals. It shoveled up both ants and crystals and carried them high into the air. The ants were wide awake when the scoop turned, dropping them from a frightening height. They tumbled through space in a shower of crystals and fell into a boiling brown lake. So, what do you think they have fallen into? Okay, so make a prediction about what do you think they fell into. All right. Then the giant scoop stirred violently back and forth. Crushing waves fell over the ants. They paddled hard to keep their tiny heads above water, but the scoop kept spinning the hot brown liquid. So they're in something that is hot and it's brown. So in my head, I'm thinking, what could that be? Well, brown and a liquid could be coffee. My husband drinks coffee in the morning. It could also be tea. So that might be a possibility too. In my head, I was also thinking it could be cereal because sometimes people put sugar on their cereal. But because it says it's a liquid and it's brown, I know that it's probably not cereal. Okay. Around and around it went, creating a whirlpool that sucked the ants deeper and deeper. They both held their breath and finally bobbed to the surface, gasping for air and spitting mouthfuls of the terrible, bitter water. Now, I know lots of people sometimes drink coffee and tea black with nothing in it, but then some people don't. So I am guessing that this is coffee because lots of times people might say coffee kind of has a bitter taste to it. I really don't like coffee, but some people do. Then the lake tilted and began to empty into a cave. What's the cave? Yeah, it's his mouth, isn't it? The ants could hear the rushing water and felt themselves pulled toward the pitch black hole. Suddenly, the cave disappeared and the lake became calm. The ants swam to the shore and found that the lake had steep sides. So, are they actually in a lake? What are they in? If I look here to give me a clue, I can see that they're in this cup and a saucer, aren't they? They hurried down the walls that held back the lake. The frightened insects looked for a place to hide. Worried that the giant scoop might shovel them up again, close by they found a huge round disc with holes that could neatly hide them. So I want you to predict, what do you think they found? A disc with holes in it. What do you think it might be? They're in a kitchen. Looks like it's morning. What could it be? I can think of a couple of things it could be. I predict it might be like a waffle, like an Eggo waffle. Could bread have holes in it that they could hide in? I'm not sure about that. What about an English muffin? Have you ever had one of those? That could be. Let's see, what could it be? But as soon as they had climbed inside, their hiding place was lifted, tilted, and lowered into a dark space. When the ants climbed, what's on there? When the ants climbed out of the holes, they were surrounded by a strange red glow. Where are they? Yeah, they're in a toaster, aren't they? It seemed to them that every second the temperature was rising. It soon became so unbearably hot that they thought they would soon be cooked. But suddenly the discs they were standing on rocketed upward, and the two hot ants went flying through the air. And that's an English muffin, I think. Yeah. They landed near what seemed to be a fountain. Where are they? They're by a faucet, aren't they? A waterfall pouring from a silver tube. Both ants had a powerful thirst and longed to dip their feverish heads into the refreshing water because they were in the toaster getting cooked. They quickly climbed along the tube. So I want you to predict, what do you think might happen? Well, I know that this faucet moves pretty fast. So I'm thinking, could it be that will they be able to hang on? It's pretty strong, especially for an ant. As they got closer to the rushing water, the ants felt a cool spray. They tightly gripped the shiny surface of the fountain and slowly leaned their heads into the falling stream. But the force of the water was much too strong. So what do you predict happens? Do you think they hang on? Or do you think they get pulled away? You predict. They got pulled away, didn't they? The tiny insects were pulled off the fountain, because here they are right here, and plunged down into a wet, dark chamber. They landed, that's my dishwasher, they landed on half-eaten fruit and other soggy things. Suddenly, the air was filled with loud, frightening sounds. The chamber began to spin. Where are they? They're in the garbage disposal, aren't they? They're in the garbage disposal. The ants were caught in a whirling storm of shredded food and stinging rain. Then, just as quickly as it had started, the noise and spinning stopped. Bruised and dizzy, the ants climbed out of the chamber. So, I want you to predict again. Do you think they're going to stay here, or do you think they are not going to stay? Let's see. In daylight, once again, they raced through puddles and up a smooth metal wall. Because where were they? They're in the sink, aren't they? In the distance, they saw something comforting. Two long, narrow holes that reminded them of the warmth and safety of their old underground home. They climbed up into the dark openings. What is that? It's a plug-in. Yeah. What do you think is going to happen when they get in there? Is it going to be good? Let's see. But there was no safety inside these holes. A strange force passed through the wet ants. When they were stunned, senseless, and blown out of the holes like bullets from a gun. When they landed, the tiny insects were too exhausted to go on. They crawled into a dark corner and fell fast asleep. And it shows that they're pushing out, like the lines. Night had returned when the battered ants woke to a familiar sound. The footsteps of their fellow insects returning for more crystals. The two ants slipped quietly to the end of the line. They climbed to the glassy wall and once again stood amid the treasure. But this time they each chose a single crystal and followed their friends home. So if you predicted they weren't going to stay, you were right. Standing at the edge of their ant hole, the two ants listened to the joyful sounds that came from below. They knew how grateful their mother queen would be when they gave her their crystals. At that moment, the two ants felt happier than they'd ever felt before. This was their home. This was their family. This was where they were meant to be. The story is Two Bad Ants. So did you make smart predictions as we were reading that story? Again, when we make a prediction, we think about what do we already know and we look at what's happening in the story. We look at the pictures, think about what the author writes in the words to help us make the best guess we can. Sometimes we make a guess, a prediction, and we're not right, and that's okay. And sometimes our predictions are right. So again, I hope you enjoyed this story, Two Bad Ants by Chris Van Allsburg, and you were able to make some good guesses about what you thought would happen next.